Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello, my dear students. It's a glad welcome. Really, I bring to you this morning. And as you see here in English Literature, chapter number 10, today we will discuss the chapter number 10, the age of Romanticism, started in 1800 up to 1850. Before we go to teach the age of Romanticism, let me remind you about the previous chapter, chapter number 9. As usual, we will talk about the age of enlightenment or the Augustan age. The Augustan age or 18th century here talk about William Black first of all. William Black in first section I gave you as a work or how he changed social order, also what he published as his masterpieces, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience of his lyrics. Also we talk about the collections, these songs of experience and songs of innocence as collections here for him. And also I gave you the first English novelists here. In these sections we talk about the novel first of all and how we can define it, the novel as length and certain complexity, how it deal with the human experience, and also final sections I gave you Henry Fielding's and Henry Fielding as an English novelist and also dramatist known for his early humor and satire. We talk about his comic novels, Tom Jones, and also we talk about his a great novelist, or he is as a great novelist of the 18th century, right? His fictions, plays, essays, what he offered to English literatures in general. Today, in this slides here, we are going to discuss after we finish chapter number 9, part 1 and 2. I'll give you chapter number 10. Also, chapter number 10 will be in this lecture, will be part 1. And next lecture, I give you chapter number 10 also, but part 2. All right. The contents here in chapter number 1 in this chapter, the second creative period of English literatures. First, we will discuss here the definitions or how we can define this century and the second creative period of the English literature. The second section will be literary characteristics of the age. The third section will be poets of Romanticism like William Wordsworth in 1770 up to 1850. And final sections will be about Samuel Taylor Coleridge in 1772 up to 1834. Now, if we want to talk about Romanticism here, before we go to the definitions and look at the next slides, let me tell you about Romanticism in general. Romanticism here was an artistic, literary, musical, and intellectual movement that originated in Europe toward the end of the 18th century and in most era was at its peak in the approximate period from 1800 to 1850. So therefore, Romanticism was characterized by the emphasis on emotion and also individualism, as well as glorifications of all the past and natures, preferring the medieval rather than the classical. It was partly a reaction to the industrial revolution, and also I can say that the aristocratic social and political norms of the age of enlightenment and the scientific relationization of natures, all components of modernity. So if you look here at this slide, the second creative periods at the first sections of English literatures, look here, Romanticism was an international artistic and philosophical movement. The second, the early Romantic period coincided here, coincided with the age of revolutions in America and France. The third here, the 1798 publications of lyrical ballads by Wordsworth and Coleridge, and later I'll give you everything about Wordsworth and Coleridge, is often seen as the starting point of the movements in England. The fourth here, the strong hold now of the movements were in England and Germany. So the two movements, I can say here, the two movements are so closely associated in so many nations, and also is so many periods of history, that one must wonder if there be not some relations of causes and effect between them, just as we understand the tremendous or influence of Puritanism in the matter of English liberty, by remembering that the common people had begun to read and that their book was the Bible. So we may understand this age of popular government. So look here. Also, the first half of 19th century records the triumph of the Romanticism in literatures and also democracy in government. The second is that the chief subjects of Romantic literature were the essential nobleness of common men and also the value of individuals. Here, also, we can say about these movements and how it can over or introduce the wonders, uh, how also it be relations of cause or effect between these English liberty. So therefore, look about the historical summary here. In historical summary, as you see, Romanticism is the 19th century movement that developed in Europe in response to the Industrial Revolution and also the disillusionment of Enlightenment value of reasons. Romanticism emerged after the 1789, the year of the French Revolution that caused a relevant social change in Europe. The third, based on the same idea of liberty, fraternity, and also legality, this new movement was born aiming to highlight the emotions and also the irrational world of the artist of natures, as opposed to the prevalence of reasons and also relationality during the new classicism. So this is about the historical summary. We can see that if the 18th century is called the age of rationalism, the first half of the 19th century is often called the age of romanticism. Again, if the 18th century is called the age of rationalism, the first half of the 19th century is often called the age of romanticism. It's true here that there was there were other powerful influences at work, but romanticism was the dominant one, at least in literatures and fine arts. So, in a broad sense, Romanticism was a reaction against the forms of conventions of the 19th century. Enlightenment, if I want to talk about enlightenment here, told the people how exactly to think, feel, and behave. In New Classicism, sit down, if we want to talk about it, hard and fast rules which the poet, a playwright, or artist must observe if he wanted to produce a perfect composition. The result was that rules, formal, and conventions reign supreme in literatures, in fine arts, and also in society generally, while enlightenment and the new classicism put emphasis on reasons. Romanticism here put emphasis on feelings and imaginations. Again, I can repeat, while enlightenment and the new classicism put emphasis on reason, romanticism put emphasis on feelings and emotion. During the age of reason, both feelings and imaginations were kept under the restraint of taste and decorum. So this is what is the briefly the history summary of this romanticism as the age of romanticism in this slice. Now, the period here, we are considering begins the later half of the reign of George III and ends with the accession of Victoria in 1837. Also, the half century between these two events is one of great turmoil, yet of steady advance in every department of English life. The storm center of the political unrest was the French revolutions. The causes of these threatened revolutions were not political but economic. This is, you can find all these things in your textbook if you look and read about the history summary of the Romanticism here and everything about the artist or literary intellectual movement as literary intellectual movement. Now, literary characteristics of the age. In literary characteristics of the age here, you will find that two poets, Coleridge and Wordsworth, they are important poets here, and we will talk about their masterpieces later, best represent the romantic genius of the age in which they lived, and also thought Scott had also a greater literary reputation, and also Byron and Shelley had a larger audiences. So in this age, we will study Coleridge and Wordsworth later in the next slices. The second here, the glory of the age is in the poetry of Scott, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, Keats, Moore, and also Southey. And here you can find it was during this period that women assumed for the first time an important place in our literatures. So we can find that the women here have a chance to make their or her important places in literatures also in this period. Now, in this slice, we will talk about William Wordsworth. In William Wordsworth, as you see here, in 1770 up to 1850, known as the father of Romantic poetry, revolutionized poetry, also wrote about ordinary life and natures in common language, and finally here, by the time he was 13, he was an orphan. So William Wordsworth, as you see, born in 1770, exactly in 23 April up to 1850, and he was also English romantic poet who, with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, helped to romantic age also in English literature with their joint publications. So if you want to talk about the poetry of Wordsworth here, the poetry of Wordsworth, as you see, there is often a sense of disappointment when one reads Wordsworth for the first time. It must be confessed that Wordsworth is not always melodious, that he is seldom graceful and only occasionally inspired. Finally, here, moreover, he is absolutely without humor and absolutely without humor, and so he often failed to see the small step of separates the sublime also from the ridiculous. Now, here about the poetry of Wordsworth, you have to know that this leads us to speak first of two difficulties which may easily prevent just appreciations of the poet's worth. The first difficulty is in the reader, who is often puzzled by Wordsworth's absolute simplicity. Wordsworth here sets himself to the task of freeing poetry from all its conceit, of speaking the language of simple truth, and also to portraying man and nature as they are. And in this good work, we are apt to miss the beauty, the patience, the intensity, and also that hide themselves under his simplicity life. And the second difficulties here is in the poet, not also in the reader. So these difficulties we can find in the poetry of Wordsworth, The first, as I told you now, in the reader, as I told you, and the second here, difficulty is in the poet, not in the reader. This is now, if we go further and study the poem that impressed us, we shall find four remarkable characteristics. The four remarkable the characteristics here is important. The one is Wordsworth is sensitive. Wordsworth is sensitive as a parameter to every subtle change in the world about him. The second is of all the poets who have written the natures, there is none that compares with him in the truthfulness of his representations. The third is no other poet ever found such abundant beauty in the common world. So this is very important. Three enough for you. I give you just a three, one, two, three. Um, you have to read more and more and understand it in order to answer. If there is question about the characteristics, you can answer by these three or the characteristics. Now, Coleridge here, if we want to talk about Coleridge in this slide, Samuel Coleridge here, as you see about the author, Samuel Taylor Coleridge was born in October 21, 1772, and died on July 25, 1834. He was an English poet, a literary critic, and a philosopher. Him and his friend William Wordsworth were the founders of the Romantic movement in England. Very important to know that he and Wordsworth, as a friend now, founded the Romantic movement in England. This is about the achievements of or work. Now, introduction. Samuel Taylor Coleridge was philosopher, poet, and religious and political theorist. The second is he was born in Devonshire, England, and third here in 1795, Coleridge met poet William Wordsworth, with whom he was the work closely. Coleridge and Wordsworth uh, collaboratively published lyrical ballads in 1798, marking the rise of the British Romantic movement, and finally in 1870, now Biographia Literaria here, a fusion of autobiography, literary criticism, and religious and philosophical theory was published. So, if I want to talk about Samuel Coleridge here, as you know that he was an English poet, also literary critic, as we say, philosopher and theologian, who with his friend William Wordsworth was a founder of Romantic movements in England, and also a member of the Lake Poets. He also shared volumes of collaborate with Charles Lamb, Robert Southey, they are poets, and also Charles Lloyd. He wrote a poem, or he wrote the poems, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, also we consider as masterpieces for him, and also Kubla Khan by him, as well as the major prose work. His critical work, especially on William Shakespeare, was highly influential, and also he helped introduce Germanic idealist philosophy to English-speaking culture. Coleridge coined here many familiar words and phrases, including, let me say, suspicions of disbelief, and he had also a major influence on American transcendentalism. So therefore, if we want to talk about the rhyme of the ancient mariner here, the rhyme of the ancient mariner is Coleridge's achieved contributions to lyrical ballads, and also is one of the world's masterpieces. You will find also in your text book everything about this poem. So it introduces here by this poem introduces the reader to supernatural realm with a phantom ships and the crowd of dead men. Also, we can find the overhanging cures of the Alberts, the polar spirit, and the magic breeze in nevertheless also managed to create a sense of absolute reality concerning these manifest absurdities. So all of the mechanisms of the poem, the rhyme of the ancient mariner, this poem, all the mechanisms of this poem is meter, rhyme, and also melody are perfect. And some of its descriptions of the lonely sea have never been equal. So this is about the introductions of the poem, the rhyme of the ancient mariner. You have to read also during your textbook and look at the summary of this poem. Now, here, the work of college, as you see, naturally divided themselves into three classes, the poetic, the critical, and the philosophical, corresponding to the early, the middle, and the later period of his career. The second here, the rhyme of the ancient mariner here is Coleridge's achieved contributions to the lyrical ballads of 1798 and is one of the world's masterpieces. Just now I told you. And here in his philosophical work, Coleridge introduced the idealistic philosophy. Very important to know here that in his philosophical work, Coleridge introduced the idealistic philosophy, not realistic, idealistic, of Germanic into England. This is everything about this lecture. You have to revise and you have to look one more time about this chapter. It's very important to repeat from the beginning and go back to every sections one by one and look about the introductions here, the contents. We discussed the second creative period and the literary characteristics of the age, William Wordsworth as a poet of Romanticism, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge as also the second poet of the Romanticism. You have to look at these one by one and look about the definitions, especially names of the sections, and read it in order to understand what we discussed in this lecture. So until I meet you again, this is time to say goodbye and see you.